never disrespect your dad.
Yes, you would. You disrespected him before.
What, the fact that he don't like you? It's a matter of fact.
Okay, well,
that's
it's
a matter of fact. How's that disrespect?
You can't give it and not take it.
You fucked up by talking about my dad. You done fucked up talking about my dad.
You fucked up by taking
Yeah.
I don't hate the man. I just want his WBO title. I pray that I have enough dignity not to hate the man.
Exactly.
Hate doesn't come into it for me. Hate destroys the game and makes it look brutal, and that's why a lot of people don't take to it. I don't hate the man. I want the men's title, and I intend to prove that I'm a better fighter than the man, which I am.
All right, gentlemen, you both signed a contract.
I personally do hate him.
Oh, man. That interview just brought back so many memories. Okay, I got my black 2 sugars, a little bit of cream. And this video, I'm just going to maybe ramble a bit, go down memory lane, just to explain to you guys how important Eubank versus Benn, and I'm talking about the fathers, the son, just how that went. Okay, let's just say the fathers. Okay, let's start there. Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn. How that went from a boxing fan's point of view from the States. All right, and I'm just going to speak to it personally in the 90s, how it went from my perspective. Because I'm telling you, this whole thing, this born rivalry between the sons, Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, is just everything to me. And it's going to smash records. It's going to break records. It's just humongous, okay, for British boxing fans in the UK. It's just humongous. And it's great. It's huge for me as well. And I just want to speak on this from my perspective and go down memory lane. I remember as a kid the rivalry between Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn. And what I remember most and what makes it just so impactful for me is I, of course, was a huge Roy Jones Jr. fan. But I was also big just on the boxing scene in the States, right? James Toney, Julian the Hawk Jackson, Michael second to none. That was my guy, okay? Mike McCullum, all those boys. You know, Iran Barkley, you know, those guys, they were just something else. That scene was just something else. The middleweight division, the G-Man, that middleweight division was just something else. And I was just immersed. I was just dialed in to the U.S. middleweight boxers, right? But then I heard about Nigel Benn. And I think it was due to picking up magazines or asking my mom or my bro. Actually, it was my oldest brother. He used to bring magazines because he worked at the grocery store where there were magazines. That's what happened, okay? And he used to bring these magazines, KO Boxing, Ring Magazine, stuff like that. And I remember seeing Nigel Benn and hearing about him. And the Dark Destroyer, like the name, you know, I was just like, I was intrigued by this guy. And we couldn't access the fight game in the UK from the States. We back in the 90s, late 80s, we couldn't really, if you remember, like the TVs in the in the 80s and before that, but you know, I was born in the 80s, they had 2 knobs. They had a VHF, I think it was called, and a UHF, right? And it was like 2 knobs. Oh God, that was bringing back so many memories. And the bottom knob had more channels and you can like pick up from different areas and you know, you just couldn't get the broadcast to be steady. It was like choppy and weird and stuff like that. But we couldn't really access UK boxing until Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn. That's how important this rivalry is. I, as ShowBizz, the adult boxing channel, the War Room, the reason why we cover the fights overseas and the reason why I'm really into that is because I couldn't access those fights until Chris Eubank, Nigel Benn. That was the fight. That was the rivalry that crossed over we were intrigued. And I remember that interview. And the interview I'm going to show you guys at the very end. If I get a copyright, I have to remove it. But I'm going to show you guys the similarities between father and son with their rivalries. But I remember seeing this Dark Destroyer type of guy looking violent. And then I saw the interview with him and Chris Eubank. And they both sound so polite. I don't think I really heard the accent until then. I mean, Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn introduced me to even the British accent. Really, I remember sitting there with my family, like, are they angry or are they, you know what I mean? Okay, my bad. Other than like James Bond and those type of movies, right? I did. Other than that, I mean, to see fighters, real, not characters, but real people speak to each other in a derogatory sense, aggressively, but sound so damn polite. I remember being so confused, being intrigued, but liking it a little bit. Like, yo, they're so well spoken. Especially this guy who I was becoming a fan of, Nigel Benn. Chris Eubank, I didn't like. I'm gonna be honest. Chris Eubank Sr., I didn't like him at all. I really, you know, at that time, you know, you're a hater, fanboy. You know, I was a kid. You know, I liked Nigel Benn. Chris Eubank Sr., I didn't like his haircut. I didn't like his face. I didn't like his smug personality. I just didn't like the guy. Come to find out, you know, when I start seeing him fight, nobody liked him. I remember the first fight, Chris Eubank Sr. versus Nigel Benn. I'm rooting for Nigel Benn. And I vaguely remember things. Like, I remember, I think, Chris Eubank, I think his music cut off at the entrance or something. I remember there was music and then there wasn't any music. So I don't know what happened there. And I remember they were fighting and Nigel Benn eye looked like it was melted. I haven't seen that fight in a long time. I'm going to search some pictures and hopefully I can post it when I'm editing this video. But I remember his eye looking like it was melted. I was looking at his eye like, damn, like he can't see. And Chris Eubank Sr. stopped him. And when he stopped him, my whole house, I remember everybody was like, bullshit. Like, we didn't want it stopped. I think all of us were rooting for Nigel Benn, I think. I don't think anybody liked Chris Eubank. But after that fight, Chris Eubank, I learned to respect him. Like, he was the villain. You know, I liked Ric Flair, and I mean, not to compare it to wrestling, but there were villains that I liked back in the day as a kid. You know, and I saw him as the Dr. Doom, you know, Green Goblin villain. And I start to respect him because though he sounds so polite, he definitely had guts and tenacity. Later, I learned that Chris Eubank was actually a street thug. I thought he came up through like Ivy School and stuff. He was actually a street thug. He was actually, a rougher character in the streets than Nigel Benn was. Nigel Benn was also a street guy, but I think he went to the military. This I found out later. Either way, after that, they didn't have the rematch right away. And Chris Eubank, I think there was a guy named Michael Watson. So in the UK, I started getting involved. I started really, as a kid, trying to I was looking at the magazines all the time. That's where I found fighters like Michael Moore and stuff like that. That was the magazines that I was reading. And I remember there was a Michael Watson. Later, there was a Steve Collins. But there was like a three. There was a Michael Watson, Nigel Benn, Chris Eubank. And I think Michael Watson he knocked out Nigel Benn. So I was starting to like Michael Watson. And I saw Chris Eubank versus Michael Watson for free. I'm not sure how we did it. I'm not sure. It was a black box. I don't know if we stole it. I don't know what happened. Or maybe it was just broadcasted for free. I just remember accessing, like we were watching it. And I remember it wasn't pay-per-view. If it was pay-per-view, I don't know. We didn't pay. But we thought Chris Eubank killed him. He was. We learned that he slipped into a coma and like paralyzed or something like that. And I began to really dislike Chris Eubank. But then after that, Chris Eubank had a run of fights where it was like he just wasn't violent. So we knew that that's when I learned about, because of Chris Eubank, I learned about Sugar Ray Robinson when he killed a guy in the ring. And Sugar Ray Robinson didn't want to fight anymore. He didn't want to box anymore after that. I learned about that story because of that. And that's when I started to like Chris Eubank. You know, I found out he had a heart and he wasn't committed to hurting guys in the ring. From what I remember, you guys in the UK, let me know if I'm capping. All right, I'm trying my best. This is what I remember. Then I'm kind of rambling, but I'm really just, I'm taken aback by the fact that we're getting the fight between the sons. It's just a big deal for me. And I know for a lot of, especially for the British boxing community. But then Nigel Benn continued to whoop ass. And we finally got the rematch. And I was split. I liked them both. Still a bit of a bigger fan of Nigel Benn, but I didn't dislike Chris Eubank at that point. And Nigel Benn cut off the hairstyle that I liked. I remember he had that basic low haircut. I think he had a part in the middle or something like that, or to the side. I forgot. But I know he had that short haircut. And I think they moved up a weight division, but they were both champions, and it was historic. It was the first fight where you had, correct me if I'm wrong, two British champions fighting each other, like with major titles. And that was pay-per-view. I do recall that. And they went at it. And at the end, we yelled bullshit again. I just knew Nigel Benn won that fight. But I think something happened. I think there was a point deduction from a headbutt or a low blow or something like that. There was a point deduction. I'm going off memory here. But I just remember it. I remember being involved, anticipating, having bubble guts, you know, for that fight and everything. I was nervous, anxiety. And I thought Nigel Benn was robbed. There was a point deduction, but I still thought he won the fight, even with the point deduction. And without the point deduction, you know, I don't even think he got a warning. I just think he had a point deduction. And that was another thing. But once again, correct me if I'm wrong. But I thought Nigel Benn won the fight. And they said it was a draw. And that messes with me because even to this day, I have to be reminded that it was a draw. I keep thinking it's 1-1, but it's not. It's Chris Eubank won, and then the second one was a draw. After that, the G-Man went over there. He was one of my favorite fighters from the States, Gerald McClellan. He goes over there, and the same thing happens with Chris Eubank and Michael Watson. Except for Michael Watson, well, it was almost the exact same thing, actually. Except for, I think Michael Watson, it was like one big shot that did that to him. Whereas for the G-Man, there was like headbutts and like a sloppy fight. It was barbaric. But for both of them, Michael Watson was beating Chris Eubank, and then that happened. And the G-Man was beating the hell out of Nigel Benn. Like, he knocked him out the ring and all those things, but Nigel Benn is so violent, he just kind of kept going. And then G-Man is blinking, and then the same thing. It's like coma, paralyzed. It was just like, what the and then I start to hate Nigel Benn because I love the G-Man so much. And they both go, I think Nigel Benn retired early. Steve Collins whooped both of their asses, you know. And that was big because I think Roy Jones Jr. was the man. I wanted Roy to fight Steve Collins for whooping their asses. Like and Roy never wanted to go to the UK because of what happened to Michael Watson and the G-Man. And the G-Man and Roy was like this, though they were going to fight each other. They came up together. Roy Jones Jr. was the man, though. So he wanted them to come to the States since he's the A side. And they never wanted to leave to come over to the States, from my understanding. But fast forward, with all of that experience I had, I may not even edit this. I want this to kind of be raw, but from all the experience that I had with watching those two guys and their rivalry, to see the parallel and almost the exact same disdain and dislike with the sons. I cannot believe that I am fortunate enough to relive such an impactful rivalry. Even better, that I'm participating in boxing as ShowBizz the adult. And I would like to be there for that one. It meant so much because I don't know if Conor Benn, I'm pretty sure they understand, but Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn, from a boxing fan's perspective from the States, okay? If your fathers introduced us to UK boxing, Lennox Lewis, and we thought Lennox Lewis was Canadian, I think, at the time, but then you heard the accent and everything. But I'm just saying, we start getting intrigued. I know I did. All because, okay, I'm gonna speak for myself as a boxing fan from the States. All because of Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn. So the reason why you have ShowBizz the adult covering boxing overseas and working with DAZN, my relationship with DAZN, that collaboration, is credited to Chris Eubank Sr. and Nigel Benn. I hope you guys get to see the parallel. I'm going to add the interviews now for both. And if it's copyright, I just have to remove both of them. But I hope you guys get to enjoy it before I have to remove it. And hopefully I never have to remove it. All right? ShowBizz the adult. I'm out.
Dad intervened with the egg throwing and put his arm, I think, on your throat. And at the second press conference, you basically threatened Nigel Benn. Said if he did that again, you deal with him. And
it wasn't a threat, it was a promise.
Oh, it's not a promise, is it?
You can't touch
scumbag.
You can't
we
touch
did.
So you can throw an egg in his face and his father can't.
No,
me and him are fighting.
You're just upset.
Me and you are fighting.
Can't stand you. And
I'm
my
not
dad has
upset.
my back. You are. That's all.
I'm not upset.
My dad put.
Me and you are fighting. Whatever happens between us.
My dad would put his arms around you. What are you going to do about it?
No one else.
What are you going to do about it? Tell me.
No one else can touch me.
Tell me.
If they do, there'll be consequences.
Consequences to what?
If anyone else touches me.
What if I was to slap you right now? What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, talk about my dad.
I'm not talking about your dad.
No.
But I told him.
But
I told him.
Get off me, please.
My old man would never touch you, so your old man's never going to touch me.
I'll never slap you.
You would never slap me.
Yeah, no,
you put your hands on me twice since my last fight.
When?
You pushed me.
Push, a little push.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You put your hands on me.
Little push and stuff.
You put your hands on me.
Stop moaning about it. A little push and shove. Stop moaning about it. Talk about my dad.
You put your hands on me. I put my hands on you.
I'll never disrespect your dad.
Yes, you would. You disrespected him before.
What? The fact that he don't like you? It's a matter of fact.
Okay, well, it's
disrespect.
disrespect.
A matter of fact. How's that disrespect?
You can't give it and not take it.
You fucked up by talking about my dad. You done fucked up talking about my dad.
Me, and you fucked up by taking this fight.
Yeah.
That's right.
What the fuck you looking at?
Chris, how important is it to you to lay Nigel Benn on the canvas?
That's not important. I just got to beat the man. It doesn't matter whether I knock him out or take him to 12 rounds and give him a boxing lesson.
But why is it so important to beat this particular man?
This is the business. This is the business. And I will do what is required on the night. And not only that, if he doesn't extend me, which I'm sure he will, then I shan't do anything more than I have to do.
You won't even face him. Why won't you face him tonight?
I'll face the man in the ring. I can face him. I'm speaking to you. You're asking me questions.
Anytime.
You're asking me questions. I'm being polite and I'm facing you. I'm looking in your face. I have nothing to say to Nigel. I find the man intolerable in that he's so wild. I have no time for such people. He has no class as far as I see it. About Nigel Benn, I would say this. The man is a powerful puncher. A very powerful puncher. For this, I would like his autograph, because after I've finished with him, he isn't going to be anybody.
Nigel Benn, will you be anybody at the end of the fight?
Hey, I have to see the thing about him. I think both sides of the coin. Like I was saying before, when Watson kicked my butt, hey, I got up, brushed myself down. Winning fought Quinones, Jorge Amparo, Doug DeWitt, Iron Barkley.
It seems that this one is working you up more than any other fight.
Yeah, more than anyone else. I think the public is demanding this. You know, I walk down the street, people say, hey, give this boy a hiding.
Well,
you know, and I am determined to go out there firing on all cylinders.
Well, let's make sure the fight takes place by signing the contract right now.
Christopher?
I have to say, there seems an element of genuine hate between these two, Ambrose.
For sure.
I don't hate the man. I just want his WBO title. I pray that I have enough dignity not to hate the man.
Exactly.
Hate doesn't come into it for me. Hate destroys the game and makes it look brutal, and that's why a lot of people don't take to it. I don't hate the man. I want the men's title, and I intend to prove that I'm a better fighter than the man, which I am.
All right, gentlemen, you both signed the contract.
I personally do hate him. I personally do hate him.
So is there any point in me asking you to shake hands after signing the contract?
No.
Well, gentlemen, all four of you, thanks for joining us tonight.